I want you to know that Richard loved you very much, Margaret. Diana's hand covered mine across the small table. Her voice carried that particular softness she used for the hardest truths. But he also loved the version of himself he could be with me. I sat in the coffee shop we'd claimed as our own after group sessions. The place where Diana helped me untangle 2 years of grief, where I'd finally learned to say my husband's name without my throat closing. Now her words hung between us like smoke. I should have stood up. I should have thrown my coffee in her perfectly sympathetic face. Instead, I heard myself ask, how long? 14 years, she said. Her eyes never left mine, professional to the very end. But to understand how I ended up in that moment, I have to go back to when Richard died and took half my world with him. Richard had a heart attack at his desk on a Tuesday morning. 59 years old. 23 years of marriage? No warning. The doctor said it was instant. I remember thinking that was supposed to be a comfort. It wasn't. Our daughter Emily flew in from Denver with her 2 teenagers. Our son Paul drove down from Portland. They stayed for the funeral and a week after. Then life called them back. Paul had his practice. Emily had her marketing firm. The kids had school. I understood. I had Richard's life insurance and the house paid off. I had a part-time job at the library I loved. I had book club and volunteer work and plenty of friends. I had everything except the person I'd built my entire adult life around. The casseroles stopped coming after a month. The checking-in phone calls tapered off after 2. People mean well, but grief makes them uncomfortable. They want you to be done with it on some reasonable timeline. I found the grief support group through a flyer at the library. Finding Light After Loss met Thursday evenings at a community center. I almost didn't go. I imagined a circle of weeping strangers and terrible coffee. I was half right about the coffee. But Diana was nothing like I'd expected. She was maybe 45, with silver threading through dark hair. She wore flowing clothes and interesting jewelry. She had this way of listening that made you feel heard, down to your bones. That first night, I sat in my folding chair and said nothing. Just listened to others talk about their dead. A man who'd lost his wife to cancer. A woman whose son died in a car accident. A younger guy whose partner had taken their own life. At the end, Diana came over to me. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Most people don't make it through the door the first time." "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. "Well," she smiled, "the coffee doesn't improve. But we do get better at being sad together." I laughed. It felt like the first time in months. I went back the next week. And the week after that, the group became my anchor. Diana had this gift for knowing exactly what each person needed. Sometimes it was a gentle push to talk. Sometimes it was permission to sit in silence. She shared bits of her own life. A difficult childhood. A marriage that ended badly. Professional struggles before she found her calling in grief counseling. She made vulnerability seem brave instead of weak. After a few months, Diana started suggesting coffee after group. Just the 2 of us. "You're doing real work, Margaret," she'd say. "I can see you processing layers most people avoid." We'd talk about Richard, about the marriage we'd had, the good parts and the hard parts. Diana asked questions that made me think, did you feel seen by him? What parts of yourself did you set aside? If you could tell him one thing now, what would it be? I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone. The times Richard made me feel small. The way he'd dismiss my opinions in front of friends, then apologize later. How he'd controlled our finances so completely I'd felt like a child. "That's not uncommon," Diana said. "Men of his generation often confused protection with control." She had this way of validating my feelings while not demonizing Richard. It felt like permission to have complicated emotions, to love someone and resent them at the same time, to grieve while also feeling secretly relieved about some things. My daughter called every Sunday. "How are you doing, Mom?" "I'm okay, honey. I went to group again this week." "That's good," Emily said, but I could hear the slight edge in her voice. She thought I should be moving on. Maybe dating. Definitely not spending every Thursday evening with a grief counselor. Diana thinks I'm making real progress, I told her. Diana, Emily repeated. You're on a first-name basis with your therapist? She's not my therapist. She's a grief counselor. There's a difference. If you say so, Mom. I let it go. Emily was busy with her own life. She didn't understand what Diana meant to me. How Diana had become the person I could tell anything. The person who knew all my worst thoughts and loved me anyway. 6 months after Richard died, I found a box in the garage. Financial documents I didn't recognize. Statements from accounts I'd never heard of. I brought them to our next coffee session. Richard had money I didn't know about, I told Diana. Quite a bit from the looks of it. She studied the papers carefully. This is complicated, she said finally. You should probably talk to a lawyer. But if you want my opinion, it looks like Richard was protecting assets. Maybe from taxes. Maybe from creditors. Men who grew up with nothing sometimes squirrel money away. It's a security thing. That made sense. Richard's father had lost everything in a business failure. Richard had always been obsessive about having backup plans. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. Diana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. One step at a time, she said. That's all any of us can do. Over the next year, Diana helped me navigate everything. She recommended a financial advisor. She listened when I felt overwhelmed by paperwork. She reminded me to eat when grief stole my appetite. She celebrated small victories. The day I cleaned out Richard's closet, the day I stopped crying in the grocery store, the day I laughed at something without feeling guilty. You're rebuilding yourself, she told me. That takes courage. I started to believe her. I even started to feel something like hope. Maybe I could have a life after Richard. Maybe I could be more than half of a couple. Paul called on a Tuesday. Mom, do you remember Glenn Castellano? Dad's old business partner? I frowned. Glenn and Richard had dissolved their partnership years ago. Some disagreement about business direction. They'd stayed cordial but not close. He called me, Paul said. He wants to talk to you. He says it's important. About Dad? I don't know what we'd have to talk about, I said. Just meet with him, Mom. Please. Something in Paul's voice made me agree. Glenn suggested a restaurant. Neutral territory. He'd aged since I'd last seen him. More gray, deeper lines. But his handshake was still firm. Margaret, thank you for coming. We ordered coffee. Made small talk about our kids. Then Glenn pulled out a folder. I need to show you something, he said. And I'm sorry. I should have done this sooner. But I didn't know how. He opened the folder. Inside were printouts of text messages, emails, photos. Richard and I weren't just business partners, Glenn said quietly. We were friends, real friends. We talked about everything, including things he couldn't tell anyone else. I stared at the first page. A text from Richard to Glenn. She has no idea. Still thinks I'm working late. Another one. Diana wants me to leave Margaret. I told her I need more time. My hands started shaking. When Richard got sick, Glenn continued, he knew something was wrong. He'd been having chest pains for weeks. He wouldn't see a doctor. But he gave me these. He said if anything happened, I should wait a year. Let you grieve. Then tell you the truth. I waited longer than that. I thought maybe you didn't need to know. But then Paul mentioned you were in therapy with someone named Diana. The coffee shop spun around me. Diana, who runs your grief group, Glenn said. She was his mistress, Margaret. For 14 years, I couldn't breathe. There's more, Glenn said. He showed me bank statements. Accounts Richard had opened in Diana's name. Transfers. Investments. He was preparing to leave you, Glenn said. He'd been moving money for years, setting her up, but he couldn't quite do it. He kept saying he needed more time, more planning. I thought of every Thursday evening, every coffee shop confession, every vulnerable moment I'd shared, Diana's careful questions about finances, about Richard's business, about what he'd told me and what he hadn't. She's been pumping you for information, Glenn said gently, trying to figure out where the rest of the money is. Richard promised her a life together, a comfortable retirement. She thinks you're hiding assets that rightfully belong to her. I wanted to vomit. I know this is a lot, Glenn said, but you needed to know. I drove home on autopilot, walked into my house, sat in the dark. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. My marriage, my grief, my recovery. Diana hadn't been helping me heal. She'd been mining me for information. Every tear, every confession, every moment of trust, all of it was her continuing the relationship with Richard through me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I started planning. The next Thursday, I went to group. Diana smiled when I walked in. Margaret, I was worried when you didn't return my calls. I had a stomach bug. I lied. I'm better now. Group proceeded normally. I shared a memory about Richard, something safe and sweet. Diana's eyes sparkled with professional warmth. That's beautiful, Margaret. You're honoring his complexity. That's real growth. After group, I declined coffee. I'm still a bit queasy, I said. Of course. Take care of yourself. Diana squeezed my arm. I wanted to break her fingers. Instead, I smiled and went home. I spent the weekend with a lawyer, a different one than Diana had recommended. This one specialized in fraud. I brought Glenn's folder. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Ruth, went through everything. This is good evidence, she said. But what exactly do you want? I want her professional license revoked, I said. I want everyone to know what she did. And I want Richard's money back. Ruth smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We can work with that. Over the next month, I documented everything. I recorded our coffee shop sessions. Illinois is a one-party consent state, thank God. I brought a small recorder in my purse. I'd ask Diana questions, lead her into talking about Richard. Sometimes I wonder if there were things about him I didn't know. Diana would always bite. We can never fully know another person, Margaret. Even those closest to us. Richard had his own inner life. That doesn't diminish what you had together. I'd nod thoughtfully. Did you ever meet him? Richard, I mean. I know you've been counseling in this area for years. Once or twice, she'd say. At community events. Why do you ask? I just wondered if you had an impression of him. Outside of what I've told you, she'd pause. Then pivot to something therapeutic and safe. But I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew. Glenn gave me access to Richard's old emails. The ones Richard had forwarded to him for safekeeping. Love letters to Diana. Plans for their future. Complaints about me. Margaret doesn't understand me like you do. She's content with her small life. You inspire me to be more. I read them all. Every single one. I cried, but I also took notes. I found the ethics board complaint form for licensed counselors. Ruth helped me fill it out. Conflict of interest. Exploitation of a vulnerable client. Sexual relationship with a client's spouse. Using therapeutic relationship for financial gain. We attached the evidence. Copies of Richard's communications. Bank records showing the transfers. My recordings where Diana discussed Richard in ways that violated boundaries. We submitted it on a Monday. Thursday, I went to group. Diana seemed nervous. Margaret, could we talk after group? Actually, I can't tonight, I said. I have plans. Her face tightened just slightly. It's important. Maybe tomorrow then, I said pleasantly. I could see her frustration, the loss of control. After group, I walked to my car. Glenn was waiting there. How are you holding up? He asked. I'm angry, I said. Good, he said. Stay angry. Angry is useful. The ethics board moved faster than I'd expected. 2 weeks later, Diana called me. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Margaret, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Please call me back. I deleted it. She tried calling again the next day. And the day after that, finally, she showed up at the library. I was shelving books in the history section. Margaret. I turned. She looked terrible. No flowing clothes today. Just jeans and a sweater. Her eyes were red. We need to talk about the complaint you filed. I don't think we need to talk about anything, I said. I went back to shelving. I helped you, she said. Her voice rose slightly. You were a mess when you came to group. I put you back together. No, I said. I turned to face her. You mined me for information about money my husband promised you. You violated every ethical boundary that exists. You used my grief as a weapon against me. That's not fair. You don't understand. I loved Richard. He loved me. We were going to be together. Then he died and left me with nothing. While you got everything. His house, his insurance, his retirement. Everything we'd planned for. There it was. The truth finally naked and ugly. He hid money, I said. Money that should have been mine. I knew you'd know where it was. You were his wife. You had to know. I didn't, I said. But even if I did, it wouldn't be yours. It would still be mine, because I was his wife. And you were just the woman he was too much of a coward to leave me for. Her hand moved. For a second, I thought she might actually hit me, but she caught herself. You'll regret this, she said. The board won't do anything. I have an impeccable record. You're just a bitter widow who can't accept that her husband loves someone else. That's what my lawyer will say. We'll see, I said. She left. I finished shelving. My hands were steady. The ethics board hearing took place 6 weeks later. I didn't attend. Ruth represented me. Diana showed up with her own lawyer. Ruth called me that evening. You won, she said. They suspended her license pending further investigation. They'll almost certainly revoke it permanently. She violated so many rules they couldn't ignore it. I sat on my couch. The same couch where I'd cried myself sick after Richard died. What happens now? I asked. She'll have to notify all her clients, Ruth said. She'll lose her practice. The community center will drop her. And the civil suit we're filing for the money Richard gave her, we'll win that too. It might take time, but we'll win. I hung up and sat in the quiet. I'd thought victory would feel different, bigger somehow. Instead, I just felt tired and hungry. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been hungry. I ordered pizza, ate 3 slices sitting on the kitchen floor. It was the best thing I'd tasted in 2 years. Emily called the next day. Paul had told her everything. Mom, I'm so sorry. For what? I asked. I should have been there more. I should have noticed something was wrong with that woman. Honey, she fooled me for over a year. She was a professional. How could you have known? Still, Emily said, I'm flying out next weekend. I want to spend time with you. Just us. I'd like that, I said. And I meant it. Glenn became a regular presence in my life. Not romantically, just a friend who understood, who'd known Richard as he really was. Flawed and complicated and sometimes cruel. I should have told you sooner, he said over coffee one day, but Richard was my friend, and I kept hoping you'd never need to know. I'm glad you told me, I said, even though it hurt, especially because it hurt. The truth is better than whatever story I was telling myself. We found more of Richard's money. Accounts in the Cayman Islands. Stock portfolios under assumed names. He'd been squirreling away cash for years. Probably longer than he'd been with Diana. It was a sickness with him. The need to have hidden resources. To always have an escape plan. Ruth got most of it back. Minus legal fees and taxes, I ended up with nearly $800,000. More than Richard's official life insurance had paid out. I gave $100,000 to each of my kids. Mom, you don't have to do this, Paul said. I know, I said. But your dad hid this money from all of us. He was planning a life that didn't include any of us. I wanted to do some good. Emily cried when I told her. What will you do with the rest? She asked. Live, I said. Just live. I quit the library job. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. I'd been working since I was 16. I was tired. I traveled. Small trips at first. A weekend in Chicago to see museums. A week in New England to see the fall colors. Then bigger ones. 2 weeks in Ireland. A month in Italy. I stayed in small hotels. ate in local restaurants. Talked to strangers. I sent postcards to my grandchildren. They thought it was hilarious that Grandma was gallivanting around Europe. I thought it was perfect. I found a new book club. This one met at a wine bar and read trashy novels. I laughed more in 3 meetings than I had in the entire last year of my marriage. One of the women, Susan, became a real friend. She was divorced, sharp-tongued, and entirely without patience for nonsense. "So your dead husband's mistress became your therapist?" she said when I told her the story. "That's some dramatic irony there. If it was a movie, I wouldn't believe it. It barely feels real to me," I admitted. "And you destroyed her career?" "I did." Susan raised her wine glass. "Good for you. Genuinely. That's some beautiful revenge." "It wasn't revenge," I said. But Susan just smiled. "Okay, it wasn't," I insisted. "It was justice." "Potato, potato," Susan said. "Either way, I like you. You've got spine." I thought about that a lot. Whether what I'd done was justice or revenge. Whether there was even a difference. I decided it didn't matter. Diana had weaponized my grief. She'd turned my most vulnerable moments into intelligence gathering. She'd earned what happened to her. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to Arizona, working in a yoga studio, no longer licensed to counsel anyone. I hoped the desert sun gave her migraines. Small of me, maybe, but honest. I went back to the community center once. Different night, different group. This one was for people learning to live alone after decades of partnership. The facilitator was a kind older man named Robert. He'd lost his husband 5 years ago. "The first year is survival," he said. "The second year is when you start to wake up. By the third year, you might actually like who you're becoming." I was in year 3 now, and he was right. I liked who I was becoming. Someone who trusted her own judgment. Someone who didn't need permission to take up space. Someone who'd been betrayed but refused to stay broken. On the anniversary of Richard's death, I didn't visit his grave. I went to the botanical gardens instead. Sat on a bench near the roses. Thought about the marriage we'd actually had. Not the one I'd imagined. Not the one I told Diana about in therapy. The real one. With all its compromises and disappointments and small cruelties. He'd loved me in his way. A limited, controlled way, and I'd loved him back. Made myself smaller to fit his comfort level. Given up pieces of myself I'd only just started to reclaim. I didn't hate him, but I didn't miss him either. Not anymore. That felt like freedom. Paul got engaged. Emily's daughter got into college. Life kept moving forward. I moved forward with it. I started volunteering at a literacy center, teaching adults to read. It was humbling work. These people had so much courage, admitting they needed help. Starting over at 40, 50, 60 years old, learning something everyone assumed they already knew. One of my students was a woman named Carmen, 63, worked as a housekeeper her whole life, never learned to read beyond a 2nd grade level. "My daughter graduates nursing school next month," she told me. "I want to read her diploma." We worked together twice a week for 4 months. The day Carmen read her daughter's diploma out loud, we both cried. "Thank you," she said. "You gave me this." "No," I said. "You did this yourself. I just showed up." She hugged me hard. Sometimes showing up is everything. I thought about that often. Diana had shown up, week after week, for over a year, but she'd shown up for all the wrong reasons, with all the wrong intentions. Showing up wasn't enough. You had to show up honestly. I ran into one of the women from the grief group at the grocery store, the one whose son had died. "Margaret," she said, "I heard what happened with Diana. I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I said. "I'm glad I know the truth." "Still," she said, "it must have been awful, finding out like that, after she helped you so much." I looked at her carefully. Really looked. "She didn't help me," I said. "She used me." "There's a difference." The woman nodded slowly. "I suppose there is." "Are you doing okay?" she asked. Actually, I said, I'm doing really well. And it was true. I was. Not in spite of what happened with Diana and Richard, because of it. Because I'd faced the worst truth about my marriage and survived it. Because I'd been angry enough to fight back. Because I'd learned I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. Some people might hear this story and think I'm bitter. That I can't let go of the past. But that's not it at all. I let go of the past I thought I had. The sanitized version. The comfortable lies. I'm holding on to the truth now. The messy, complicated, sometimes ugly truth. And truth, I've discovered, is surprisingly comfortable. It doesn't require the constant energy of maintaining illusions. It just sits there, solid, real. Mine. Last month, I bought a small house in Vermont. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a porch, a garden plot. I'm going to spend summers there, reading, writing letters, maybe learning to paint. Emily thinks I'm having a midlife crisis. Mom, you're 63. Exactly, I said. Midlife. I plan to live to at least 126. She laughed. Fair enough. I don't know what the next chapter looks like. I don't have it all planned out. For the first time in my life, I'm okay with that. Richard needed control, backup plans, hidden resources, emergency exits. I spent 23 years accommodating that need, making myself predictable so he could feel secure. I'm done with that. If I want to buy a house in Vermont, I buy a house in Vermont. If I want to spend a month in Portugal, I go to Portugal. If I want to eat ice cream for dinner, I eat ice cream for dinner. No one gets to tell me what my life should look like anymore. Not my kids. Not society's expectations of widows. Not the ghost of a man who loved me but couldn't quite manage to be faithful. And especially not some woman who thought she could build a future on my husband's lies and my grief. I hope you find your own truth, whatever it is. I hope you find the courage to look at it head on. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. And I hope you discover, like I did, that you're strong enough for whatever comes next. Thanks for listening to my story. I'm Margaret, and I'm doing just fine.